All right, and welcome back. So, as I promised, we are going to work on some unions today, some special modeling here. So, we're going to start with just some of these simple bricks here, and then once I've shown you how to use it, then we'll move over back to our rug and set that up nicely. So you have parts. These are parts here, and what unions do is you can basically take two parts. So let's say, let's change the size here. Let's say I wanted to make something like this. So I want this shape right here, this plus symbol, I don't know, maybe for a hospital or something. But right now you can see this is what I call Z fighting, where both surfaces, it's trying to render this part and this part at the same time over here, and it can't decide which one. And so to avoid that right now, we might have to do something like this, where we have three parts. But what unions allow you to do is we can select both of these parts together, right click, and then union right here. And it turns it into this special union operation right here, and it is a single part. So you can see it's a single part. If you need to undo that, you could also separate a union. So now we have the two parts here, and it's a really powerful tool. It's amazing what you can do. So you can not only, you can group them, but I'm going to show you one other thing. So let's say, we want, I know. So we're going to get one of these parts, change it to a cylinder, and nice and big. So let's say that we want to have a smaller cylinder like this. So we have our large cylinder, and we want to cut a hole through it. That's the size of this small one. So I can make this part, stick through it, right click, and I can negate. You'll notice it turns transparent and pink. And that negated part, when you union it with another part that's normal, it will basically cut away anything that it's touching. So if I right click and union a normal part and a negated part, it'll cut out the negated part right there. So this is really useful for making stuff. I don't use it too often, but there are definitely cases, such as our rug that we're going to use, where this is very useful. I can separate this again if I wanted to, and I'm going to separate. You have to separate a negated part to get it back to normal. And you can do some more complicated stuff like this if you wanted. Let's negate these. Oops. Don't want to group it. I want to union it. And you can get some fairly large or fairly complex unions. So let's see how we can put this to use. One thing to note, sometimes people say they have trouble moving parts through each other. Just remember, if you have collisions on, that I can't actually put this part inside another part. So if you're trying to move this part in, you won't be able to. Just remember, you can turn collisions off to fix that. One other tip I find is if I have to make something very small, that building it on a much larger scale using one stud can really help to, sometimes when you're building small, it doesn't want to union, it'll give you an error. I find that building on a larger scale helps prevent that, and then once I've made the union, I can scale it down. So for example, this union it, and I can scale it all the way down to this size if I wanted. So let's put that to use now. I've got my part here. I'm going to duplicate it, and whoops, don't want to grab the room, I just want this. 6. I'm going to make it non-can collide. So if I have it can collide and I change to a cylinder, right now you'll see it moves up like so. So I'm going to make it non-can collide, cylinder. It's going to stay where it is. Now I can turn it back and it'll be fine. I'm going to rotate 90 degrees, and I'm going to change the size here. There we go. We'll put one on the other side, and then we can select, I'm going to start with this part here, and whichever part you select first is going to determine the orientation of your final union. So if this part was oriented, say, 0, 0, and 90 degrees, and you select it first, when you make the union it will be 0, 0, and 90 degrees. In this case it's, for example here, if we start with this and union it, you can see its orientation is 90. I'm going to undo that. If I start with the middle here, its orientation is 0. And you'll notice that the orientation of the fabric too changes. And I actually like this orientation for the fabric better, so we're going to go with that. So there we have a single piece for a union, and there's one more thing to discuss about these, and that is the collision here, collision fidelity. And right now it's at default, so I'm going to go to my settings, and you can go, it's Alt S, or just right there as you saw, go File and then to your settings. And what I'm going to is rendering here. Nope. Physics, there we go. And if we go down to the bottom of physics, there's this option for showing decomposition geometry, and if I select this, okay, this one you don't have to restart Studio. What this does is, if I move this, you can now see this is the actual collision. What you're seeing here is how this is actually going to be in the world as its collision box. So right now it's on default. Hull, in this case, hull may actually be more appropriate, but if you have more complex geometry, hull will be slightly, it'll try and keep the geometry, but it'll kind of smooth it out a bit so it won't be as exact. Let's see if I can give you an example here. So here's this one. This is the default, but if I change it to hull, you can see it's going to give me just the rounded shape of this. It's not going to be quite as exact. And then a box is just going to be simply that, a box that's the same size as the bounding box, I believe. So default is the most exact, and in this case I'm just going to leave it at hull because we don't need anything too complicated. Box would be a little weird if you're floating in the air right on the corners, so I'll leave it at that. And then I can just hit Alt S, turn this off, and then all I have to do is move. You just have to at least start to move a part or resize it to turn off the it showing you what the geometry is. That can be useful when you're making like a hole in the wall, let's say, or a door using a union, and you want to figure out why you can't fit through. You can turn that on and see if perhaps the actual collision area is different than what you're seeing, and that might be causing your problems. So there you have it. That's unions. Just remember, 2 parts, put them together, right click, and then you can union them. And then if you put a normal and a part that's negated, that the negated part will cut out from the normal part, and then you can also separate unions. In our next video, I believe what we should do is we should get some fire in this fireplace, and I will show you how to use particles for that. So stay tuned and have a great rest of your day.